You got anything else before I take a break? We're waiting on our candidate, Miss Jamel Brooks, and she is running late. You got anything else?
Yes, want to do a little
I need to run these commercials because we got a ton of them. All right, but they pay some bills, so let's do it. We're gonna do it. 92.9 WZLAradio.com. Anything, and I mean anything, can happen in here. In the multimedia complex, Radio City, in Abbeville. Anything can happen in here. I tell you, it's happening too. All right, let me get you right. That's number. I can't see that, Carol. Is that 3?
That's number 3.
That's 3.
Yes.
All right. We're about 30 minutes late, but as we stated, anything can happen, not only in here but out there too, and that's what we experienced from a candidate perspective out there. But we are thankful. We praise God that she made it. Yes, we are.
She made it. She made it.
Yeah. And I was such a nice guy.
Yes, you were a nice guy.
And we're having an experience with denture adhesive. My co-host, I gave her emergency instructions on what to do just in case. That's coming from you. Just in case we have a mishap on the radio, but it's right here. Right there, Carol. Miss Jamel, we're going to see how good you're going to be if you make it to Columbia in fixing stuff, all right?
Welcome to episode 33 of Black, White, and Blue in the South, a podcast discussing Democratic politics with a Southern flair. I'm Bill Kimmler.
I'm Jamil Brooks.
And we're coming to you from Greenwood, South Carolina, a little red county in a very red state. If you like what you hear, please leave a rating and a review, tell your friends about us, follow us on social media, or better yet, get me a job working for the South Carolina state government, because apparently you can make a $1.8 billion goof up and keep your job with nothing more than a little light reprimand. According to the state newspaper,
a state Senate panel investigating how the state had $1.8 billion sitting in an account without knowing who it belongs to will lay the responsibility at Treasurer Curtis Loftus. However, unlike last year when Comptroller General Richard Ekstrom resigned, the committee will not recommend Loftus be removed from office at the request of the governor's office.
So any job which gives you security like that, man, that's an attractive position to be in. Let us know what you think by dropping us a note at blackwhiteblueinthesouth@gmail.com. Send us your comments, questions, topic ideas. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Threads, and Mastodon. We share video clips of all of our episodes and links to news articles that'll make you more informed, so check out those show notes where you will find all of that. That opening clip, by the way, comes courtesy of WZLA 92.9 FM in Abbeville, South Carolina, where Dr. Jamil Brooks was interviewed this past Saturday. I was also interviewed the week prior, but unfortunately, there's no recording of that magnificent performance. This week, we're allowing my podcast partner Jamil an additional week to heal up. Then, after that, if she's not back in Black, White, and Blue recording studios next week, she's fired. Because this ain't no state treasurer's job. We have to take our responsibilities to you seriously. But we do have a treat for you today. We have a couple of news segments in our backlog that never made it to air because of time constraints. We've also sprinkled in some best of clips that we guarantee you'll find entertaining. So, we hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you next week with a brand new, highly polished episode.
For up-to-the-minute reports, stay tuned to this station. Now the news.
We want to do a follow-up to last week's episode about hate crimes. And we talked about why do people hate the hate crimes bill. There was a news article that came out that there was a hate crime committed in South Carolina. The headline states, South Carolina man and woman plead guilty to hate crime and conspiracy for bias-motivated armed robberies targeting Hispanic victims.
A shame. Disrespect.
Now, that stood out because typically when we talk hate crimes, you're immediately thinking of the black population.
Okay.
That is the only subgroup that is affected by hate crimes. And that's not the case. And in this case, it was the Hispanic community. Basically, this couple, and they were a young couple. Well, maybe not so young. There was a man and a woman, 20 and 33-year-old from Colombia. And they conspired to target Hispanics or Mexicans at places like grocery stores or convenience stores. They would rob them at gunpoint, and they pled guilty and confessed to that at the federal level. So they both admitted their involvement. This was an armed robbery back in 2021. As part of the plea deal, they've got to pay restitution to their victims, and then there's also sentencing that's going to come for the armed robbery, etc. But the hate crimes portion of it is about financial restitution to their victims. That's at the federal level. South Carolina, just to repeat, is one of only 2 states in the country without a hate crimes legislation. And therefore, the federal legislation kicks in, which is a lot weaker than most states have implemented already. So in this case, they just got to pay up. U.S. Attorney Adair Burrows. Do you know that name?
I don't.
She ran for U.S. Congress, I believe, 4 years ago. Was a very powerful candidate running for Congress in South Carolina. She did not win. And then under the Biden administration, she was appointed as the U.S. attorney because she's a very accomplished lawyer.
Okay.
So she wrote, prosecuting civil rights crimes is a priority for our office. Federal law recognizes that crimes targeting people of a particular race or national origin is particularly egregious. So the sad thing is that in South Carolina, we have to rely on the federal government to bring and prosecute and impose hate crime legislations when we should be able to do it ourselves a lot easier and a little more impactfully.
Yeah. You know how I always, you already know. Yeah, I'm rolling my eyes with this hate crime bill. You know, laws can be at the state level can be more stringent than the federal level. So when you say they can be if they choose to be, but when you say that here, the individuals who I'm going to say tormented those two, the Hispanic victims, they tormented them. I don't know what it would feel like to have a gun put in my face saying, give me something. That is enough. Restitution, I don't know if anybody out there has ever had restitution paid to them for a crime, but that's almost like nothing. And it takes them forever to pay you back. You won't even realize that you're getting a restitution because if the person is incarcerated, how much of a restitution are you really going to get?
Right. I'm going to give a bit of a history about the federal hate crimes laws in the United States. It goes back to the Civil Rights Act of 1968, and that was the first mention of using race and other attributes to commit crimes. And people convicted of violating the law at the federal level faced fine or imprisonment of up to 1 year. Or both. So, but that was the first baby step, 1 year imprisonment for committing a hate crime. Later in 1994, there was the Violence Against Women Act, which built upon that and allowed victims of gender-motivated hate crimes to seek compensatory and punitive damages. Then in 1994, there was also the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, and all that did was increase the penalties for hate crimes. So now we're going beyond 1 year, which most could do standing on their heads. But the problem is that it applied only to federal crimes. Then you have 1996, and they've built upon those hate crime laws, and they passed the Church Arson Prevention Act. So now we got to protect the churches. If you're damaging or vandalizing a church or preventing people from worshiping, you are now subject to the federal hate crime regulations. Then in 2009, the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, which extended protections to gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. And that came after an absolutely heinous crime. Just look up Matthew Shepard and just be prepared to have your heart broken. I believe that happened around the time I was in college, but boy, that is just devastating. And then just recently last year, the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. So there was never a law in the books, about lynching, but they formally defined lynching as an act of two or more people in a conspiracy to maim or kill a person based on a real or perceived traits of a victim as protected under federal law. And it was the first anti-lynching bill to be passed by Congress, following over 200 bills that were filed since the Reconstruction era. So 200 plus bills later, they finally got an anti-lynching regulation in effect.
Yeah.
I feel bad using that sound effect on such a serious topic.
No, but I mean...
But your eyes.
Yes, if my face could tell it.
Now, what I would like to talk with you about, Jamil, is about actual incidents of voter fraud.
Okay.
So we're not saying voter fraud doesn't happen. It does happen.
It does.
So I went and researched, show me some examples of real voter fraud that has occurred recently throughout our country. So let's start off with one example. This is in New York, Rensselaer County. A former GOP elections commissioner admitted to voter fraud, and other top GOP figures were charged in a ballot fraud case. That's New York. Have you heard of any voter fraud yourself, Jamil?
Let's go. New Hampshire Republican resigns as investigators conclude he doesn't live in his district.
Oh, snap. I guess that's the law up there. You ought to be living in the district you do for run in.
State House. You better live there.
Did you hear about the Republican candidate's wife who was arrested and charged with casting 23 fraudulent votes for her husband?
You can't blame that woman for loving her husband.
Listen, my wife didn't submit no 23 votes when I ran last year. I'm going to have a talk with her.
What about one...
Hold on. That was in Iowa, by the way.
That was in Iowa?
That was in Iowa.
Let's check on them. They're still together? I bet so. That's dedication.
It is.
One Republican, Duncan, says...
Wait a minute. Which Republican is that?
Duncan.
Is that our Duncan?
That's our Duncan.
Our congressman, Jeff, Mr. Husband-loving family man Duncan.
Okay. That's him.
What did he have to say?
He said after the 2020 election, Trump was fighting massive levels of Democratic fraud. Every illegal vote should be thrown out and a federal investigation should come, especially after January the 6th.
So this is Mr. Fraud himself saying there were massive levels of Democratic fraud.
Game recognized game. So, let's just be real.
Ooh, that's a good one. Game recognized game. A Trump-backed candidate for Michigan Attorney General and an ex-GOP lawmaker face state charges over alleged voting machine plot after the 2020 election. He was arrested because he had possession of voting machines and conspiracy to access those voting machines. This is, again, he was running, what was he running for? Attorney General. And he's out there skimming up voting machines looking to tamper with them. Damn.
Well, I need a win. I got to get that win some kind of way.
Have you heard of any more incidents?
5 GOP candidates blocked from Michigan's governor primary voters over alleged false signatures. So somebody signed it for somebody.
So to run in a primary to be Michigan's governor, you got to get a whole bunch of signatures.
Yeah. And because I didn't get them, I'm going to create some. How's that sound?
It sounds great. Well, down in Florida, some poor elderly Florida Democrats said that the GOP canvassers duped them into changing party affiliation.
Duped?
Hundreds of them were forced to change their votes against their will.
How you get duped?
They got duped.
4 people plead guilty in North Carolina ballot probe in 2016 and 2018. Just stop.
Hold on. What do you know about these guys?
They pled guilty to tampering with the ballots in 2016 and 2018.
And they were all Republicans.
Yes, they were. They did.
So anyhow, it always seems like the party that's screaming most about election fraud is the one out there committing all the election fraud.
I love the way you pull that together. Yeah. Game recognizes game.
In the Index Journal, and that's the local Greenwood paper, there was a headline article that read, Greenwood Recovery Houses, the Good and Bad. Now, the topic of drug and alcohol addiction is serious, and fentanyl overdoses has become the number one leading cause of death in that area over the past few years. And in fact, I actually partook in a recovery celebration and memorial event uptown by the water fountain. And it was very moving, testimony from former addicts or family members of addicts.
Wow.
And it's a very hard subject, and it's mixed with both compassion and at the same time blame and guilt, and all sorts of feelings get mixed into it. And this is something that no one government official, no one hospital, no one medical or social work or what have you are ever going to be able to solve. It's going to take all of us. But one group that plays a role in this are recovery houses. And there are a number of them in Greenwood. I'm not going to name them all here in this episode, but they serve a role of giving an addict a place to go that's healthy, that's a place where they can recover and get the support they need, especially during those first few weeks or months after they've tried to break through their addiction.
Okay.
It's a great place to get your affairs in order, maybe get back into the workforce, get some skills and education, have a community of psychologists and therapists to work with you. Unfortunately, many of these recovery houses don't live up to that ideal. They collect money from insurance and from state funds to, quote unquote, perform those services, but there is little to no oversight that they actually deliver what they are supposed to. In this article, they interviewed Greenwood Police Chief T.J. Chowdhuan, and he mentioned that he saw people walking with suitcases down the street who were just kicked out of a recovery home for breaking a small infraction, and they were kicked out. And it's not uncommon, they say, that they find people who come from out of town because Greenwood has several recovery homes. They're put into a recovery home, but they are left pretty much abandoned by these recovery homes after just a few days, if not weeks. And I think we have an issue where we need to have legislative or some sort of agency oversight of any group that takes funds, public or private, for recovery in this fashion. In fact, I remember I was in a meeting where there was a representative of the Greenwood Sheriff's Office, and somebody asked the question, what's one of the biggest issues in Greenwood that he sees personally being out in the streets? Without hesitation, he mentioned recovery homes. He came right out and said some of these homes are just a money-making front with absolutely no intention of performing actual recovery services. Is this anything that you have seen or have been aware of?
It is. I think that also has something to do about one of the articles that we talked about, panhandling. Because you're right, if they violate, the individual that is staying there is asked to leave, and then they have nowhere to go. So then they become a part of our homeless population if they're not able to reach back out and get in contact with their family. So you would believe that all of the work that we would have hoped that would have been done inside of the homes, it would be undone because now they have nowhere to go. And so you put them back in an environment where it is a little more conducive for them to return to those bad habits. I agree with the need to have legislator oversight there. See, now let me just go back. Right here is what I would like for our representatives and our senator to be focusing. A place that is gathering public funds, governmental funds, and we have citizens or people that are here with us that are seeking help at a very vulnerable time, needs guidance, but we're not checking to make sure that those individuals that run these facilities are doing their job. Could they spend time right here? Because if they need an agenda of what to work on, I'm free. I can help them understand that this is a situation where we have hurting people wanting help. And each of those individuals that represent Greenwood could be working to come up with something there.
The challenge has been thrown.
I'll go back and check. But I don't think any of the 12 bills that was submitted from our representatives, Senate or representatives, included anything that referenced this.
No. And if you are looking for a reference, there has been a bill which was submitted by the House, H3997, Certification of Recovery Homes. So it's nice that some of our legislators have heard the call. In fact, I think Representative Dillard from Greenville is one of the co-sponsors. But this actually is a bipartisan bill.
I appreciate that.
None of our local legislators' names are on it, but this does have both Democrat and Republican names on this.
As it should.
And the idea was to create a credentialing entity to develop and administrate a voluntary certification program for recovery houses.
Yes.
To help bring some standards and guidance.
I think that's
and
important.
you can apply for that certification. Where it sits right now, well, it's not gotten out of the House committee.
All right.
It's really not gotten anywhere. And so it's not likely to happen.
That's a huge insult, because the thing about addiction is it doesn't know a name, it doesn't know a race, it doesn't know any other identifying factor. It is just as good for one person as it is for another. And that's why I commend those that are supporting this, and it has bipartisan support. But I would like to see more go back to do something with this. I don't know of another agency, and maybe they are, that is able to accept funding in this particular capacity and supposed to have services for people in need that are not competent at the time, and there's no follow-up on it.
Here's another example. This is from Greenville, and they interviewed, in a different article from the Greenville News, they interviewed a former substance abuser talking about his experience with recovery homes. He said he sought help from a Greenville substance abuse recovery home, then another one, then another one. He said none of them proved helpful. Everywhere he was offered a bed, the house leader would put him to work and collect the bulk of his paycheck, leaving him with very little money and a substandard place to sleep. He's been in and out of recovery homes since 2012. Quote, everybody around me was still getting high, and they were forcing me to work for wages I don't even get to bring home. It put me in the mindset of not caring. It puts that type of person in a bad place. I ask for help, and this is what happens to me. These are probably some of the most vulnerable citizens in our community.
Yeah.
And even there in the recovery home industry, there are people willing to take advantage of them for money. And I think this is where government oversight is necessary and required to help those who can't help themselves.
You're right. They're in need.
There is one clip that I do want to play. This is a fantastic little clip just to get us warmed up for today's episode.
Okay.
There's a guy, his name is Incrediberry. That's his TikTok handle.
Okay.
It sounds like he's from Alabama, and he hypothesizes what it would be like if Jesus were alive today and ran for office. All right. You want to hear what Incrediberry has to say?
Yes.
All right. This is good.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. In many parts of the country, especially in Alabama, where there are 13,000 churches, if the election was between Jesus and Satan ran under the Republican ticket, Jesus would lose in a landslide. And I'm not saying Jesus would run as a Democrat. He could be a member of the Green Party. He could be a libertarian, independent. As long as Satan had the R beside his name, conservative Christians would overwhelmingly fill in the circle on the ballot beside Beelzebub. And it'd be a hell of a campaign. Literally. They point to Jesus saying, welcome all immigrants, and say, we can't have open borders. They point to him saying, render unto Caesar, and say, Jesus worships the government and would raise taxes. They point to his words of love, tolerance, and not judging, and call it DEI. Mm-hmm. They see him heal the sick for free and say, who's going to pay for that? I pay my medical bills. Why should I have to pay for somebody else's? They will come up to him on the campaign trail and say, hey, are you that fellow that's running against Satan? And Jesus will say, I am he. And they say, oh, we don't do them pronouns around here. They will point to him, feed the masses, and say it's socialism and we should be given handouts, and if you want to eat, you should pull yourself up by the bootstraps and not depend on the government. They will say Jesus is against abortion and gays, and Jesus will say, well, I'm Jesus and I've never said a word about either. And then they go, Jesus is gone woke. They'd use this picture in ad saying this is what they want. Grown men in dresses reading to kids, indoctrinating our precious children with their sick agenda. You can't tell me that wouldn't happen. Conservative Christians would literally put Satan into office over Jesus as long as Satan had an R beside his name. And then without a hint of irony, they say, we got to get Jesus back into people's lives. Because they will hear everything I just said and say, well, we're not actually against any of that. We're just against the government being a part of it. But they want religion in the government because we're a Christian nation. But they don't want to do any of the teachings that the Jesus they worship taught. Because the only way you can be a conservative Christian is if you vote for the people who do the opposite of what Jesus said to do. How else can you explain the party of Protect the Children proudly wear AR-15 lapel pins when guns are the number one killer of kids, and their other preferred piece of decoration is a cross, which Jesus died on? These are the people who will stand under the cross as Jesus told the thief, amen, I say to you today, you will be with me in paradise, and mutter to themselves, they should have complied. hallelujah, and roll tide.
Wow, was he wrong?
Nah, he brought it. It's facts.
Can I vote for that guy?
Yeah, I know, right?
Oh, yeah. He'd
Right.
get my vote, man.
Yeah.
He was, I don't know what it would take to come up with that material or be able to say it like that off the top of your head, but that guy was amazing.
He was
Every
natural.
point was spot on.
Yeah, it was natural.
That was incredible.
Yeah, that needs to go viral.
I
Maybe
think it
already
has.
is. I don't know.
It has,
Okay.
Sevi.
All right.
You're good. I'm sure he appreciates the advice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, now that you're all fired up, Jamil,
Sorry, my bad.
I can see the blood boiling over there.
Yeah,
Look
that
at
pissed me off.
It should have. Let's talk about another item to piss us off.
Okay.
The South Carolina State Superintendent is seeking control of library and classroom collections.
What book she read in the library?
Exactly.
Okay.
So, State Superintendent Ellen Weaver and the Department of Education that she oversees has drafted a proposal for a new regulation that would give the state, not local school boards, authority over school and classroom library materials. The South Carolina Association of School Librarians disagrees with the change and were left out of any decision making, believing material selection policies should remain at the local level via district and school approved policies. But no, Mama Weaver wants to be mama over everybody and wants to make these choices for you, your kids, your schools, your local community. So this actually is something that could become law. This is a draft proposal. A link to that PDF is in our show notes. You can read it for yourself. But basically, it's the state taking control. The party of limited government wants government in your business every which way.
So I want to do this without being completely disrespectful to the state superintendent. So I'm going to have to try to toe a tight line, even though it is very obvious that I do not appreciate the way by which she came by her seat. I do not think that an individual who did not come by their seat by meeting the qualifications that everyone else would have had to meet the right way. I find it a slap in the face of every person who's acquired a master's degree or a higher degree. All the rest of us had to go the full time. There was no corners cut for us in order for us to hold positions. So with that being said, I think that in this particular role, her coming into the office said that rules that were once established to protect education would be broken. They were broken for her to get in, and I think that they will continue to be broken. I am 100% against the state mandating what is going into the libraries. To me, it looks a little cult-like. It looks a little cult-like. So you mean to tell me that educators who've trained for years know exactly what is out here and what is good for the students in their districts need the state to tell them what books are able to be read and what should be included in the library?
One commentator wrote, "Does a vocal mini minority of zealots trump the professional opinions of people who have college degrees on books in school libraries?"
That is what they're attempting to do. And that's an insult. So, but you look at the state superintendent, and she is the superintendent for education, but she herself is showing that she has no faith and no value in education. I think we might have put this lady in the wrong spot. And I say we because it's a whole bunch of people who didn't go out and vote. So because you did not vote for Ellis, because you did not go to the polls on that day, you allowed Weaver to come into this spot. And what you know is public education, which has helped so many of us to get to where we are in life, they're just taking one little block away from it at a time. Why would you not want to have conversations with an area that specializes in library science? You just want to come in here and make these changes. What is making you want to govern such a change? What is it? And it can't be that you value education, because your route to where you are shows that you don't. Everyone else has to go a full time. I remember when she got this particular position and the 6-month master's degree, and I'm thinking, I think I had to go like 18 months before they gave me one.
I've got 2 master's degrees. One took me 2 years to achieve, and the other 18 months.
Okay, and see, they didn't cut any time off of that.
I got no political favors from the university I attended. I had to write papers, take a bunch of exams. I had to take about 3-4 full-time classes every semester, plus be a TA and teach. What Ellen Weaver did during those 6 months that she started and finished her master's degree while campaigning.
And I was going to say, and campaigned. That is not physical. I don't even know a person who could do that. But
it consists of is what it consists of.
I want us to run it just like that because that's what it is. But what my issue is, if you didn't respect education, which you showed you didn't, if it's okay for her to go into her role and they work out some special circumstances where she doesn't have to do the remaining 12 months on her degree and she can get a master's, I think they need to be cutting checks back to all the people who have a master's degree and went over 6 months, because it seems like we could have did it all in 6 months if she could have.
Yeah, the superintendent of education, you would hope, would be as little political as possible, because it's about educating the students, exposing them to the world and expanding their minds. But instead, the first thing that Weaver did as superintendent, spoke at a Moms for Liberty event in Philadelphia in June. So you can see exactly the extremism that she goes towards. Now, people may object, well, Moms for Liberty, that's just parents wanting to exercise their rights for their kids. So let's talk about Moms for Liberty for just a quick second. I want to tell this quick story because what happens elsewhere can happen here. In Florida, 2 members of Moms for Liberty called the police on a pair of school librarians over a book from a best-selling young adult fantasy series that a 17-year-old student checked out. So a 17-year-old, the same age, by the way, that they feel it's appropriate to get married. This gargoyle fantasy series that's very popular nationwide. The 17-year-old checked it out, and Moms for Liberty people called the police. This lady told cops that a 17-year-old minor had checked out the book from Jay High School. The cops are like, really? This is why you're calling us? And they said, this is child pornography.
And calling police for like crap like that, they should have written those parents, a citation for wasting their time. Because if you're talking about Florida, and I'm not just Florida, but any state, policemen have a lot to do. And coming to a library because a person checked out of a book because the 17-year-old did it. How about you have a conversation with that 17-year-old's mother? Let that be the conversation instead of going to the police department. They should have wrote citations for both of those women.
It's all about control. That's what they want to exercise. They want to exercise control over what you think and can read and see. This proposal that the South Carolina Board of Education, they're having a hearing on starting on November 14th. So here's what's going to happen. They've got this proposed law change they want to make. They're going to have public hearings about it. People are going to line up from around the block to oppose it. You're going to get a few people to support it, but I can guarantee you most of them will be against it. And what will happen in the end? It'll get pushed through by this ultra right-wing House and Senate that we have in place today. This thing's going to get signed into law. You just watch.
This is why we can't grow as a state or as a nation. We spend so much time going back and undoing things that's already been established and can be effective.
This policy would statewide ban books for all students, including high schoolers, if they include descriptions or visual depictions of sexual conduct, or if they include content that could not be portrayed or read aloud on broadcast television or radio during daytime hours. So think about that. So let me quote for you something from a book that's in all of our South Carolina school libraries at the moment. You ready?
Go.
Here's a quote. She lusted for the lechers of Egypt, whose members are like those of donkeys, whose thrusts are like those of stallions. You reverted to the depravity of your youth when Egyptians fondled your breasts, caressing your young nipples. That is Ezekiel verses 20 to 21 in the Holy Bible. So you tell me if I can go into public on daytime broadcast hours and read that passage and many others like it, whose members are like those of donkeys.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that we go banning the Bible. I'm saying that if you're going to write a law written like that, then say goodbye to your Bibles.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be gone. It does not meet those standards. And that just points out how ridiculous those standards are.
Yep. Wow.
This is the first episode of the new year, and we've titled it Kimmler versus Brooks in the Battle of the Chicken Sandwich with a Little Pickle. You'll learn why in just a few moments. I'm Bill Kimmler.
I'm Jamil Brooks.
And we're coming to you from Greenwood, South Carolina. The other thing about the campaign is that we have hit a little road bump.
Yeah, we should discuss it.
You know, one of the most common reviews we get about this podcast is that Jamil and I have a good rapport.
Yes.
And on the issues, we complement each other. We tend to be oriented in the same direction. But over the holiday break, we did find a wedge issue.
We did.
And the topic there was Chick-fil-A on Sundays. Here's the headline. Quote, new bill could force Chick-fil-A to be open on Sundays at some locations in New York. Our own senator from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, rushed to New York City to defend Chick-fil-A's honor. Let's take a listen to what Lindsey had to say about it.
Hey everybody, back in New York, about to have lunch at Chick-fil-A in New York City. As I speak, the state of New York is trying to pass a law requiring Chick-fil-A to stay open on Sundays at state rest stops. This violates the Constitution. This violates the religious liberty of all of us, and the company called Chick-fil-A who tries to honor the Sabbath. Lend your voice to this cause. Stand up for Chick-fil-A. We need to have their back.
Now, Jamil, you know I love you, and you are a tremendous podcast partner, but I don't know if I can continue on with somebody who's in alignment with Lindsey Graham.
Okay, first.
Can you explain yourself, please?
First, let me separate the two. Jamil and in alignment with Lindsey Graham should never come in the same statement, okay? You can break that up however you want, but not in that same sentence. That's number one. Number two, I'm not necessarily agreeing with anything that he said, because if he is saying we need to have Chick-fil-A's back because it's unconstitutional and it's messing with religious freedoms, he can stand that hard on when you get your chicken sandwich, but he can't stand that hard to protect constituents that are in his state. So when we're talking about religious freedoms and constitutional rights, I'm going to argue for something a little bit grander than a chicken sandwich. So I don't agree with him, but I agree with the stance of where we're going here.
Okay, so let's explain.
Yeah, so I don't feel that, this is what I've been saying, when Chick-fil-A came up with their business model, their plan, it was not to include a 7-day work week. So every financial forecast, every budget, every business plan application they've submitted has been Monday through a Saturday. That's that. When Chick-fil-A secured property in New York, it secured it under the same business model that it had been since its operation. So to tell them that because you are here, you are now going to modify your business plan for 1 day of service to ensure that you meet what we're asking you to do, I feel is not right.
So your point of view is more contractual oriented,
Correct,
as opposed to any religious debate or constitutional freedom perspective.
Correct.
Okay, so let's set the scenario. The locations we're talking about are New York State-owned locations along their throughways. They own these travel centers, where there's shops and stores and rest areas and restaurants and food marts, etc. And Sunday is one of the heaviest travel days. I know I do a lot of driving on Sunday myself. And people rely upon these travel centers to grab some bite to eat and to use the facilities. So there's an expectation that these places would be open.
Okay.
And so that's what this bill was trying to address, saying, listen, all the truckers and drivers out there, and if they wanted a chicken sandwich and it happens to be Sunday, why should they show up to one of our New York State rest areas and find it partially open? Where only some stores are open and others are not.
Yeah.
But I do get that point of view. It's like, hey, when you signed on Chick-fil-A,
You knew.
You knew.
You knew.
So here's a little more about the law that I think is probably not as well known.
Okay.
Those Chick-fil-A's that are in operation are not impacted at all.
Okay.
The owner of those Chick-fil-A's, it's a retail company called Applegreen. They recently entered into a 33-year contract with the Thruway Authority, and they've got leases on those spaces to run their restaurants under that agreement. And the authority spokesperson said they will be able to operate under their normal hours under that contract. So they're not impacted. This law is only for any new Thruway rest areas that are built or any new lease opportunities that the contract's going to be, listen, the expectation is, as a business, you need to be open 7 days a week.
Yes.
And I think that the state is within their right to set those terms
Yes.
at the beginning of a contract.
At the beginning. So when this is another thing about headlines. So
Exactly.
Lindsey jumps out here and records, and I don't know if you're listening, but there's a chuckle in his voice when he's saying some of the things like, and we've got to, and we need to. But he jumps out here, and this is what I've always harped on, to create another distraction. We have so much crap going on. Who in the Sam world is thinking about getting a chicken sandwich on Sunday? If you roll up to Chick-fil-A And if you've eaten there before, you know it's going to be closed on Sunday. Don't stop at that one. Go to another one.
That's right.
And for him to insult us, to think that we won't think that it's a contractual obligation, is even more disrespectful.
So I do put blame kind of in two ways. I read the headline to you, and there was no indication there. I mean, it sounded like Chick-fil-A was about to have all their stores shut down by the state of New York under this law. And then Lindsey Graham perpetuates it because I find it's either two things. They either didn't read the law to find out exactly what the terms were, and I'm sure if he had read it, he'd be like, oh, that's it, right? Only for new locations, and it's a business contract thing. Or they know exactly what's going on, and they fly up there anyway because they have a personal agenda, like you said, of distraction, of getting people riled up. And either way, I don't appreciate either of those approaches. I personally take the approach of understand and read something to the best of your ability before you open your mouth about it.
Yep.
And never base an opinion just on a headline you read. You've got to read the dang blang article.
Yeah, you got to dig.
You got to dive in deep sometimes. And that's a lesson, I think, to be learned in this particular case. But yes, Lindsey, I thought, embarrassed himself. And so did our Congressman Jeff Duncan, who jumped on that train. Again, only hearing what he heard from Fox News or reading the headlines, and then jumped on the whole religious liberties thing.
And both of those individuals should be real busy with other stuff.
We came here to talk about a hearing that was held in the South Carolina State House just this past Tuesday, and then a debate on Wednesday. The legislation just started up for this term, all right? So they kicked off in January, and of all the problems and all the issues facing our state, the number one priority they had was to address what they call the problem of transgender children and gender-affirming care.
In a situation like that, I don't think that you should be able to say before people, as you are trying to defend and support your stance, that the research shows. Tell me where the research is showing that.
I'm going to put a pause on that because another representative in our next clip brings up that point.
Don't play me with 60%. Who did you poll and where'd you get that 60% from? I wrote here what he just said. Don't do it. Because if you do it, he listed the whole back of every medication bottle that everybody in South Carolina and the United States of America takes. So where would they want, how do they want that bill to be set up?
So he said that the FDA...
It's called side effects.
The FDA warns of a rare condition that may be an outcome of this medicine. But you know what else has rare conditions, possibly? Aspirin.
Everything
right?
does.
Everything.
Everything does. And you see, this is not a good tie-in, but you see the commercials that says, if you've suffered from, and they will put out a medication that has gone through all the clinical drug trials, you've done everything that you were supposed to do, it's documented, the FDA has their portion of it, and you see that information.
If he's worried about the side effect of this medication, he should read what on the back of the Viagra bottle that he takes. Now, blow his mind.
Stop it. The AMA supports it.
Well,
the American Medical Association.
And kids are given puberty blockers for a whole host of things. Precocious puberty, that apparently we don't have a problem with that. Mm-mm. So, there's a risk benefit to everything we do.
Let me play Representative J.A. Moore, who was the first to question McCravey after he read his summary.
And then the 60% regret rate that you mentioned, what was the source of that?
I believe there are several studies out there. I've reviewed a lot of them.
The one that you were quoting.
Well, I can't. I'll give it to you after this hearing. I'll be glad to go find it for you.
So that 60% regretting quote, you don't have the source for that?
I believe it. I believe the 60 Minutes program talked about that. I'm
so
not
your
sure
source
if that
is
was
60
the study.
Minutes?
Well, I'm not sure if that was the study I read, but I know that there was one, at least one or more. And they vary, I'm not going to say that every one of them is 60%, but there's at least one or two that say 60%.
But I'm just being for clarification. You said it was a fact, but you don't have the source for that fact.
Well, it's a fact that there are studies that show that.
But you don't have those studies that
I told you I can get them to you after this hearing. I don't want to bring out a study in the middle of a hearing and try to find it and all that, but I'll be glad to get it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Boy, what kind of student was he in college?
I don't want to bring out a study and all of that in front of this hearing.
All right. I majored in biology.
Oh.
And I'm just going to say, you don't talk like that when you're talking about studies. You have
don't.
that data with you.
Well, it's a fact that there were studies.
Right. That's... I mean, and that's the thing is as somebody who's been in the science field and knows it, to see somebody who is not in the science field but trying to take data and use it that way.
Oh,
and
how
then,
frustrating is it as
and
a
then
scientist to
not
see these non-scientists butcher?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Last month, back in December, we had a local resident here in Greenwood named Oliver Goldsmith.
Yes.
And Oliver is just as amazing of an individual as you can. He is transgender, and he took some time to speak with us on stage about his journey and dispelling some of the myths. And boy, he got a standing ovation afterwards. The first speaker we've ever had that got a standing ovation. But he directly addresses the so-called studies that Representative McCravy quoted. So I'm going to play a clip of what Oliver had to say on this. It's actually quite enlightening.
Yeah.
Doing some research on this, John McCravy keeps citing this source. I noticed when I was tracking this, keeps citing this source that 80% of individuals that pursue transgender affirming or procedures, which makes it sound like surgeries, but really we're talking about hormones here, regret their decision as adults. That is a staggering statistic. That is because it is not true. The actual statistic is less than 1%, and that is just a detransition statistic. Surely, our community representative wouldn't just lie. So, I emailed John McCravy and I was like, hey, I'm a really interested party. I would really like to know where the statistic is from. If you could please direct me in that area, that would be great. And to his credit, he emailed me back. And he directed me towards a study that was conducted in 1995. I want us to think about that for a second. What science could we think about that is the same now from 1995? In fact, in 1995, our diagnostic criteria for gender dysphoria wasn't even created yet. This was just based off of the old criteria, which is not the same. At Lander, we have, when we write research papers, we have to cite studies that were conducted within the last 10 or so years, you know? And, for example, Dr. Walk Up. If I cited a study from 1995, would you accept that? No, of course you would. Of course you wouldn't. And so why should we allow our state representatives to make such ill-defended claims that it would result in a failing grade for any local college student in his same district?
Boy, he has such a way with words.
Let me just go ahead and say I love Oliver. Oh my goodness. Like, oh my God, I love Oliver. Okay, I'm sorry. Carry on.
Such a natural, the way he constructed his argument, the way he flowed it, his personality, he just radiates somebody you want to be around and engage with.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyhow, he brought up some very good points. How about you, Ms. Biology Scientist? Do you agree with what Oliver had to say?
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of those studies were, people who might have been questioning. So they did kind of bring in a lot of people since they didn't have gender dysphoria as even a thing yet. It could have been just somebody who dressed a little bit differently, a woman who might have dressed a little bit more masculine, or a man who might have looked a little bit more feminine, So there are a lot of things that we don't know from these studies and huge amounts of limitations because of that. Yeah, I love what Oliver said. I think it's great.
Did you know we got a lovely shout out from a worldwide famous podcast.
Oh my gosh.
Called the Daily Beans Podcast. They got themselves like 1 million listeners.
Wow.
And our humble little show here in Greenwood, South Carolina got mentioned
That is cool.
on the air by them last week. You want to hear it?
Yes.
I love it. Or is this me? It is me. All right. This is from Daniel Duncan, who we know and love, pronouncing him. We know him, by the way. He's a once and future candidate. You know who Daniel Duncan is. Howdy Beans crew. I hope this finds you well. I wanted to shout out my friend Bill Kimler, who was by my side throughout my run for State House last year. He's continuing the fight while I'm sidelined with the family medical issues. Daniel, I hope everything's okay. He started a podcast with the wonderful vice chair of his county party, Dr. Jamil Brooks and Bill. They host Black, White, and Blue in the South, discussing South Carolina politics every Wednesday. And they're both running for state house this year in districts 12 and 13. Their podcast is Black, White, and Blue in the South. So if you're local to South Carolina, just give them a listen, give them some support.
Awesome.
And we'll have a link to that in the show notes.
Thank you, Daniel. Good to hear from you, my friend.
Indeed.
How about that?
Yay.
And you know what? An even bigger thank you goes to Daniel
Yeah,
Duncan.
I was just thinking that. Like, thanks,
Shout
Daniel.
out to you, my brother.
Yay.
This guy is the living embodiment of generosity.
Yeah.
He's not Mr. Moneybags, but just the way he's always thinking about others and putting in good words and doing good actions like that. In last year's campaign, he dropped my name on, I think it might have been this very podcast. Maybe it was another big one, but he dropped my name. And next thing you know, I'm getting campaign donations from all around the country.
Wow.
$5 here, $10 from there.
Wow.
But he did that. He didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
He was there for himself, and he happened to drop my name down, and I got a few bucks as a result.
Thank you, Daniel.
He's just amazing. Candidates usually hold barbecue or dinner fundraisers. You know what he did to fundraise?
What?
A blood drive.
Oh.
So his way of raising funds was to bring the community together to donate blood for those in need. So that's just the kind of guy he is. So whatever reward he's not getting in this life, I hope definitely he's building up some good karma for the future. He's certainly earned it. So
We
thank you,
appreciate
Daniel.
it. Yeah.
Thanks to that Daily Beans podcast. So thank you,
you.
ladies. You
Yes.
are awesome for sharing your platform
you.
and helping little old Bill, little old Jamil down here in South Carolina.
We appreciate you.
Now, who else can we aim to get mentions for us? Where can we target? Oh, I forgot to tell you.
What?
Did you know that President Barack Obama name dropped us in a recent speech? I actually caught a clip of that off of C-SPAN. Listen to this.
I'm afraid.
Listen to Black, White, and Blue in the South. Michelle and I listen to every episode multiple times.
Yes, isn't that incredible?
Bill?
My former president, your former president, Barack Obama, mentioned us in a speech that he was giving out in the campaign trail, helping some candidates out.
Do not make me get excited, Bill. Don't.
You're shaking over there. Look at you shake.
Because I know you didn't say the President Barack Obama.
Yes.
Say it, black, white.
Do I need to play that again?
I mean, maybe.
Here we go.
Listen to Black, White, and Blue in the South. Michelle and I listen to every episode multiple times.
Tell me, isn't that incredible?
Yes, it is.
I also want to give a shout out to Parrot AI, who was able to whip up that voice.
This is why
of the
I
president.
said, do not get me excited, Bill. I said, do not get me excited. That's okay. So my goal is to make sure that he does say that.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
we got
One can dream, and sometimes you have to visualize what you want the outcome to be before you
happen.
get it. So I'm just going to pretend that was for real.
Okay.
Now, the Daily Beans call out was for real.
That's legit.
That was legit.
Okay.
And one could only hope that the President Obama would do the same for us one day.
He will. Speaking it into existence.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Black, White, and Blue in the South. We hope you enjoyed what you heard. Please take a quick minute and leave us a rating and a review of our show. If you do, it'll make Jamil's knee heal up faster and have her back out on the campaign trail kicking butt and taking names in no time. If you are a blue dot in a red sea, keep the faith, keep up the hard work. Change only happens over many years of work and dedication. As Abraham Maslow said, you know Maslow? He's the guy who invented Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, I don't know why this guy had so many needs that he had to create a hierarchy for them, but whatever. Anyhow, Abraham Maslow said, in any given moment, we have two options: to step forward into growth or step back into safety. And we know there's nothing safe about the backward steps that many want to take our state and our country. So move forward it is.
The end.
The preceding podcast is a product of Big Media and copyright 2024, all rights reserved.